Welcome to our very first podcast episode. Season 1 of The Table digs into the story of Cain and Abel and how that same theme repeats itself all throughout Scripture and how it relates to us. On today's episode, you'll hear from Tanner Moore, Brian Froese, Garrison Jones, and Sean Decker. Thanks for joining us at The Table.
All right. Well, hey, good morning, guys.
Morning.
Yeah, welcome, man. We tried to get Garrison to do this at 5:30 in the morning, but he wasn't having it, so...
Too early.
Yeah.
I was up then, though. I mean,
yeah.
It just happened.
I've got a 1-year-old, so...
Yeah.
Yep. We're in the same boat.
Might as well have just done it, right?
Yep.
No, that's what I was thinking. Well, hey, man, welcome to the maiden voyage of this study together, like we're doing. We've been studying the Bible together for a lot of years now, and we've had a lot of really cool moments together, just individually, as a community, in study and reading the Scriptures together and discussing them. And I don't think our intention was ever to start a podcast. Our goal, I think, has always just been to grow together, to as Paul prays in Ephesians, that the eyes of our heart would be open and that God would give us a spirit of wisdom and revelation so that we could know Him better. And as we've done that, God has blessed us, and our church has grown, and our small groups have become large groups and multiplied into several small groups. And this is just kind of a natural product, I feel like, of where the Spirit has led us. And so I don't think that a podcast was ever our intention or our goal, but maybe this can bless more people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. As our community expands and we can make our study, and so we're not here today to recreate any podcasts that are out there that you guys can go listen to, and you should go listen to all of them because they're all good. We're just going to study the Bible together the way that we do, and record it this time.
Yeah,
and hopefully other people can grow the way that we've grown, and I know we'll be blessed by each other. So
Absolutely.
Well, I know there's a lot of times on Sundays people can't be there, and they've asked you to record our class, and you've done that a lot over the years, and so this, I think, is a good way to do that, and be able to share with the rest of the church and community, and it's because we've seen a lot of cool things, and we've grown a lot, and so I think we got to share that.
Absolutely.
It's definitely worth sharing.
Yeah, definitely. And shout out to Otis back there, who's producing for us and met us up here this morning.
Absolutely.
And so, man, this is fun.
It's good.
I'm excited. I'm looking forward to it.
Definitely.
It's good.
Let's jump into it. What do you say? We're going to start off with the story of Cain and Abel. We're going to look at it from a lot of different angles, and we're going to trace it really through the story of the whole Bible, all the way, from Genesis to the book of Hebrews, and find those places where that story pops back up, and look at a few different ideas that come from the story. And so we're looking at Genesis chapter 4 this morning. And so, Sean, as you turn there, would you read just the first 10 verses there of Genesis chapter 4 for us, and then we'll jump into it. But I'll tell you this before you do, and this is what I want for us all to do. I want for us to do our very best to just release anything that we've had with Cain and Abel before. I want you to look at this story with the mindset of, I've never read this story before. I've never heard it. I don't know what's going to happen. It's my first time to read this story. Really what I want you thinking is, what questions pop into your head? First time reader, have no idea what's going to happen. We're going to read the 10 verses. You tell me, just knee-jerk reaction, what are questions I have?
Okay.
Perfect.
All right, go ahead.
We'll do that.
All right, this is the New Living Translation. Sorry, just coughed big into the mic. My bad. All right, chapter 4, verses 1 through 10. Now Adam had sexual relations with his wife Eve, and she became pregnant. When she gave birth to Cain, she said, "With the Lord's help, I have produced a man." Later she gave birth to his brother and named him Abel. When they grew up, Abel became a shepherd, while Cain cultivated the ground. When it was time for the harvest, Cain presented some of his crops as a gift to the Lord. Abel also brought a gift, the best portions of the firstborn lambs from his flock. The Lord accepted Abel and his gift, but he did not accept Cain and his gift. This made Cain very angry, and he looked dejected. "Why are you so angry?" the Lord asked Cain. Why do you look so dejected? You will be accepted if you do what is right. But if you refuse to do what is right, then watch out. Sin is crouching at the door, eager to control you. But you must subdue it and be its master. One day Cain suggested to his brother, let's go out into the fields. And while they were in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him. Afterward, the Lord asked Cain, where is your brother? Where is Abel? I don't know, Cain responded. Am I my brother's guardian? But the Lord said, what have you done? Listen, your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground.
Right. Cool. Thanks, Sean. So I'll pose that question to you again. What knee-jerk questions? What come up as you read the story?
What was the difference in their offerings? Why was Abel so good and why was Cain so bad? What's going on there?
There you go. Yeah. That's the question I want to. I was glad that's the first one that comes up. I think that's the natural question, and that's the one I really want to dig into. Before we do, any other questions or ideas?
I think part of me wants to ask, why didn't God protect Abel if he was so good and righteous? Why did he just allow Cain to just kill him? That's kind of where were Adam and Eve on that deal too? Do they recognize the tension there?
Yeah,
there was, because there had to be some tension if it went to murder that fast.
Yeah. Great point. Well, that's really where I want to focus right now, is this idea of so why. Why is Abel's sacrifice earn him favor with God, but Cain's does not? And so let's speculate for a little bit. Do you have any just speculation as to why that might be the case? And also, have you ever been taught anything about this? Have you ever heard something along these lines? Because there are a few, I think, popular misconceptions with this story that I want to iron out as well. So, what do you think?
Yeah, the first thing I think about is what we're taught is that, it talks about Cain bringing some fruits of the soil.
Yeah.
But that Abel brought the firstborn of his flock. And so I don't know if that's kind of where you're leading, but that's the first thing I think about is.
So what's the difference there? What are you suggesting is the difference?
Well, I don't know if I say, well, Tanner just brought some pizza or whatever, versus
I brought the best pizza.
Versus Garrison brought the first steak that came out of the calf that he
or right out of the oven or something, right? Like it's totally fresh.
You know what?
Right?
To me, it seems different. I don't know.
Yeah,
it's implying that Abel brought his best while Cain brought something.
Right.
Okay.
Well, and that's what that's what mine said, that Cain presented some of his crops.
Right.
Right. So it's just something he had.
Yeah.
That's what. And I don't know what other translations say about that, but
the only thing that I can think of is obviously, like, without reading into it too much, because I think I've learned enough about the Bible to not just read the words and take it at face value. You know what I mean?
Explain that a little bit. What do you mean by that?
How far down the rabbit hole do you want to go?
We got time, man. Let's dig. Get your shovel out.
Podcast.
Man, I just think about, like, so many different things that I read as a kid that later I learned, God, that's not at all what it's saying.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's one of the things I think about. I'm a little more careful now whenever I read something like that to think, oh, that's exactly what it means. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Great point, Sean. What do you think about that? What's your reaction to what Ryan said about taking everything at face value, and also to the difference between Abel specifically being mentioned as he brings his firstborn, and Cain, it says there's a sum in there, in the New Living Translation that you read.
Well, I think we're all, if you're raised in church, it depends on who your teacher is. There's always a bent in that direction, right?
Yeah.
And it could, I think I've been taught, well, it was about the heart behind it, their motives, or, they each gave an offering, but, just that kind of thing. Well, it doesn't specifically say anything about their hearts behind it, or where they were, or their relationship with God at that time. And so I think it's important. I think, like Ryan is saying, to dig for yourself and take it further down the rabbit hole, if you will, to find out, what is it really saying? And yeah.
I've always felt like with stuff like that, the logical assumption to us, what makes sense is, well, obviously his heart wasn't in the right place. It doesn't say that, but I think that's where I naturally go, because you just think, well, logically, obviously his heart must not have been the right
because
place.
we see the end of the story. They killed his brother. Well, so we
Something was there.
Yeah, we can go back and be like, oh gosh, well, he was in a bad spot.
Yeah.
Like, what was wrong with him from the beginning?
I think in verse 7 is interesting. God says to Cain, if you do what is right, will you not be accepted? So there's something he's not doing right.
That's right.
Because God says, I'm willing to accept you. Your fruit is fine. It's no worse off than the cattle, but something he's doing is not right.
You're right.
You know?
Yeah, and it's important whenever we're reading, especially these ancient Hebrew writings. I mean, we're talking about literature that is thousands and thousands of years old here, written on a continent that is thousands and thousands of miles away from us, in a culture and in a time. I mean, it might as well be Star Wars, right? In a galaxy far, far away. And so to
Gotta have a Star Wars reference.
That's right. How do you feel about the Star Wars reference, Garrison?
We'll edit that out.
Okay. Oh, man.
That's awesome.
This would be my time to make a Texas Tech joke, but I'm surrounded by only Tech
I'm expecting
fans
some
here,
Harry Potter
so-
references too.
Oh, yeah.
If we could do that.
Definitely.
I can get behind
definitely. Okay, good. Boy, and I've totally lost my train of thought thinking about Star Wars. But so anyway,
Ancient Hebrew.
as we, it's important. And I know we've had this conversation before together, but just for our listeners, maybe if you haven't been in a class that we've been a part of, it's so important to decide what type of a tourist you're going to be when you transport yourself into a different time and a different culture, which is where these writings are coming from. And so I think about it in, like there's two ways that you can go on vacation. I'm not sure which one you are, but you can either go on vacation with your fanny pack and the sunscreen on your nose, and you stay in a resort that has food that you're familiar with, and you do things that you had predetermined you'll do, and you speak your language, and you find people who can accommodate to you, and that's a really popular way to vacation. But there are other people, when they go on vacation, they want an Airbnb that is in the middle of a city somewhere where nobody else speaks the language, and they go and put themselves into that other culture. And and so both ways of vacationing are fun and good, but you got to decide going into your trip which type of vacation are you going on.
Absolutely.
And I think we have to make that decision with the Bible as well. And it's not wrong to bring the Bible into our context, into our culture, and we're going to try to do that today. But we can't do that alone. Yeah. We can't only go to the all-inclusive resort and expect the Bible to cater a buffet to us. Right? Like, we've also got to go find the biblical setting, the biblical culture, and the biblical time, and the biblical language, and we've got to put ourselves into that context as well. And so let's try to do that first here with the Cain story, and let's bring it back into our context for a little bit.
Cool.
And so let's do it with that question: why did Cain not have a favorable offering? What's wrong with Cain's offering? So I'm gonna give one kind of explanation that I've been given and why I think it's wrong, and then I'll give another explanation that is, I think, specific to this type of literature that we need to know, and then we'll speculate on that for a moment.
Okay,
Perfect.
I was in college. I've worked for a couple different churches, and when I was in college, I worked at this one up in Canyon, and I had this gentleman who, you talk about his heart, he had a really good heart, and he was really dedicated to biblical studies, and he was one of those guys that he wanted an answer for every question in the text, and so that at one point in conversation came up as why Abel was accepted and Cain was not, and he gave this explanation because Abel brought a sacrifice that involved the shedding of blood,
Mm-hmm.
and Cain didn't. Cain's sacrifice was produce, and God doesn't want produce. God wants a sacrifice of blood, and you know, he quoted a passage in Hebrews, you know, that you seemingly could be correct, that says without the shedding of blood there is no forgiveness of sins, right? And I mean, he talked about the different offerings that are prescribed. But if you just kind of glance through the Bible, it doesn't take long to figure out that that's not true. There are a lot of places where God asks not for a sacrifice of blood, but for a sacrifice of produce. And a lot of people offer sacrifices of produce. And in fact, there are even times when a sacrifice of produce does atone for sin. So, as an example, in the book of Leviticus, whenever chapter 5 in the prescription of the sin offering to make atonement, after the explanation of the sacrifice of the bull or the goat or the lamb, it says then if somebody can't afford this, then they should bring 2 pigeons, and they should offer the pigeons. But if someone can't afford that, they should bring a small portion of the finest flour and present that to God, and there will be forgiveness. So there is a provision in the book of Leviticus for somebody to have atonement, and that's a conversation for another day, but to have atonement with a grain offering. In fact, one of the 5 major offerings in Leviticus chapter 2, is called the grain offering, right? And it's God giving an entire chapter of Leviticus about, you know, whenever you bring an offering of flour, this is how it should go. Right. This is the type of oil you should use, and here's, you know, you should wave it before the Lord. It's a wave offering. And, you know, the festival of first fruits requires a type of grain offering. The festival of Sukkot, the festival of Shavuot, you know, all of these major Jewish festivals require not just blood offerings, but also grain offerings. And so I think it's really important to say that that's not true, that Cain is rejected because he didn't bring the right offering. I think there's wisdom there for us. That's what I want to unpack for just a moment, if we can. What do you think is significant about the fact that Cain doesn't have to bring an offering from Abel's flock? Think about that for a moment. Let's talk about it. What's good about the fact that God doesn't expect Cain to bring a sacrifice from Abel's herd?
Kind of levels the playing field. You know, I don't have to try and be Ryan and do what he does, or sacrifice what he sacrifices. I can give from what I have and not have to worry about anybody else. It's far more personal.
Yeah. What else? What does that say to you?
I'm helping people experience the Tanner pause on the podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Because they're going to get to know that along the way, too.
Absolutely. We'll have to edit some of that pause time out. But
I actually thought about something to say, but I wanted to see how long it took till Sean broke.
That's awesome, man.
Oh, man.
We know each other well.
Oh, so that's good.
I was just thinking, I mean, it's along the lines of what Garrison was saying, that, you know, if Cain had to use an animal from Abel's flock, then that implies that his sacrifice is better, that it is more worthy. Like, I have to go somewhere else to get my own sacrifice. I can't, what I have isn't good enough. Even if it's all I have, it's not good enough. I've got to go get it from somewhere else. So, I mean, it's the same answer that you gave. It's
sure.
Yeah, and to me, the thing that I think about is just that I'm giving from what I have, and I don't need to think about what somebody else has.
That's right.
I don't need to think about what Abel has and what he's giving, because his situation, his life is different than mine is.
That's right.
And so I think God doesn't. He's not going to use that to compare, and that's why I think I agree that it doesn't have anything to do with whether it's a blood offering or
I think
produce or
it
whatever.
continues to like spiritual gifts.
There you go.
We can reach out and say, I wish I had his spiritual gift.
Yeah.
And God's like, no, what you have is really important.
right.
Or
Absolutely.
even tithing. I wish I could give that amount of money, but no, what you're giving is what you have. And so I think it's not just about sacrifices either. We can apply this further and further and further,
absolutely.
which is really cool.
That's
and,
good.
and peaceful too.
Yeah.
That don't have to be Ryan or Sean. I have gifts that I have that
That's
they
right.
don't, and they have gifts I have, and we work together and form
Yeah.
a spiritual body, which is really cool.
And that was going to be my next question: is where's the peace in that? Do you find peace in knowing that God doesn't need Cain to bring Abel's sacrifice? And where's the peace in your life with that?
I think that, well, just from the very beginning, Cain, part of that is comparison. He's comparing himself to Abel.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that is so dangerous for us.
Absolutely.
Is that sin of comparison, because as soon as you start looking at somebody else and you get your eyes off of where it needs to be,
That's right.
then
that's
you
right.
start thinking the wrong direction. And I think that's probably, to me, what happened to Cain is he started thinking, well, maybe mine's not as good as his or whatever. Yeah.
Well, and thousands of years later, we're still doing that.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's the world we live in. It's easy. I know women struggle with that a lot, with this idea of comparison and just with other women, right? And they have it all together, or they look like this and I don't, or they have this, or their kids act this way and mine don't, or whatever. And so it's easy to say women struggle with that too, but men are, in our own way, we still struggle with that, with
Absolutely.
comparing ourselves and our jobs and finances and
Achievements and-
exactly. Yeah, it's easy. Like
Trophies, victories.
Like we're in the same boat if we're
That's
looking
right.
at it that way.
That's right.
And so I think you asked what peace is there. I think there's also freedom.
Yeah.
There's freedom in operating out of your gifts.
That's right.
And I think that comes with some maturity. And there's times when I do it better than others, I think. But there's other times when I see people kind of living out of their lane that God has put them in, and I'm like, dang, that's really good.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, that's good for them because I don't have to do that.
Right.
And God can use us in different ways, and that, I think there's freedom in living out of your gifts.
Yeah, I was having a conversation with another guy who's in our small group, and he was talking about feeling overwhelmed at church. He's involved in a million different things going on in the church, and he basically just asked me, almost straight up, why do you not do all the stuff? And I told him that there was a time I did. I remember whenever, Sean, when you were the only minister on staff here in that kind of transition season, and Kelly and I were helping with the youth, and I was teaching youth on Sunday morning, and also small group adults when I could, and I was doing all of the things the same as what this guy had kind of been talking about. And I said that I realized that I was doing a lot of things, but I wasn't really doing anything well. But whenever I just let go and realized that, hey, I think that God has kind of called me into this ministry of teaching, that the ministry that God has blessed me with has been more impactful than any season in my life. When I have just allowed myself to let go of some of that action, some of that activity, and just like you said, live out of my gifting, and live out of the nerdy questioning. That's just who God made me to be. And so when I have just given myself the freedom, I feel like the freedom from God to just be Tanner, and not be Superman, but just be me. Look what the fruit of that ministry has been, and it's been a fruitful ministry, and blessed beyond more than I could have asked or imagined, right? And so, I mean, look, we're doing a podcast, man. That's crazy, right? And so, yeah, I agree, man. I think there is freedom, and I think that there's peace and there's comfort in knowing that God just needs me to be the best me. He doesn't need me to be a good Sean.
Right.
I'm not ever going to be able to lead our worship the way Sean leads worship, and that's okay. Right? And I'm not going to be a preacher or a pastor like Joe. I can just be a basketball coach. And that's good too.
Absolutely.
Right? It's good. It's not just okay, it's good. It's good because that's what God called me to be, and it's good to be that. Right? What do you guys, you have any more thoughts about that? Or
I was thinking about, Garrison just taught a Wednesday night DNA class on eliminating the ruthless elimination of hurry. It's hard for me to get all that out.
Yeah, I know.
And I think in the book, and you can correct me if I didn't say it right, it talks about saying no to what is what something that's good, so you can say yes to something that's great.
That's better.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Speak into that a little bit.
Yeah, so one thing he says is, like you just said, we get so busy and get involved in so many things because we don't want to say no. We want to help everybody. One of my favorite parts of the book is he talks about knowing your limits and accepting them.
Yeah.
And so for everything you say yes to, you have to say no to something else. That's just the reality. And so we have to say no to something that might be actually really, really good in order to say yes to something that's better.
It's good.
So that's a very, very good way to look at things.
Yeah.
So
it's good. And trust that God is going to bless that.
Absolutely.
Why are we so afraid of saying no? I think about that sometimes.
Good question.
That's a good
Why are
question.
we so afraid of saying no to things whenever people ask us?
Are you afraid of saying no to things?
Not anymore.
Okay.
I used to be.
Well, how come?
I think for me, it was always just fear of what people would think,
Yep.
like
Yeah.
people's perception of me.
Yeah. And that's perfect. I think two of it is just that we want to help people.
Yeah.
And if this is a chance to help people, then if I say no, I'm not doing God's will. I need to make sure I'm doing what God wants me to do. And so we feel like if we say no, I'm saying no to what God wants. And that can be, it's hard.
Yeah.
You know?
But again, I think we're circling back to this comparison idea.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Right? And
Because look at so-and-so and what all they're doing. Wow, they're so
absolutely.
involved and they're impactful here. And
Absolutely.
yeah,
right.
yeah.
And if I don't show up to that thing, then what will someone else am I really serving? And if I have this free time, is it wrong for me to sit on it?
Right.
Is it wrong for me to be at home and watch the Cowboys today or whatever, whatever that thing is that you do? And not after last week, not watching the Cowboys, but
I mean, I think that'll resonate. I know because Amber will watch this and she's pointing at me because I'm very much a yes guy and I struggle with that because I want to be helpful. I enjoy being needed, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I want to be helpful, like what you said, and be able to reach a lot of people. I love being around people. That's when I get recharged. And so I'm like, yeah, let's go. Let's do all the things, right? There's no reason we can't host every small group that we ever have, you know? And I'm learning sometimes the hard way that it doesn't have to be that way. And sometimes it's better for our family and just our ministry as a family to say no to some things. Yeah. And so I'm still learning that. And I think it'll resonate with a lot of people watching because we think there's a lot of people that we don't give ourselves permission to say no sometimes. Yeah. We think we've got to do it all. And if it's with the church, like if I say no to something with the church, I'm not doing my job, or I'm a bad Christian, or I'm a bad church member. And we got to give ourselves permission to be able to do what we're really called to do.
Absolutely.
And not on some other things.
Well, and last thing I'll say about this, and then we'll parlay this into God's question to Cain. But another thing I've learned is that, and again, now, if you're listening, or we're all very involved. We do a lot of stuff, and we're not saying that you shouldn't serve.
Check out.
Right? We're not
Please
saying
don't check
that you should just sit.
We don't need anybody really.
Right? That's not what we're saying. What we're saying,
Garrison's going to be upset because our numbers for serving.
Going to 2 services, our volunteers cut in half. Tanner thanks a lot.
That's right. Man, it was going really good till that podcast came out. Oh man,
Play that off the thing.
So, but one thing I've learned also is that every time I say no to something that is not in my wheelhouse, it opens up an opportunity for someone else to serve that is in their wheelhouse.
Absolutely.
And so sometimes I can rob people of the gift to grow by choosing to to try to do everything.
That's a great point.
And
And that takes trust.
It
That
does.
somebody else, that God will provide somebody else too. I think that's hard.
Yeah.
Another thing too.
That's a good point.
We want it
right.
done right, and so we don't trust that God will provide somebody else too.
That's right. I think about that just like as a basketball coach. I've got assistant coaches and I've got players, and I can't do everything. But when I try to, it's just a chance for one of those assistant coaches to not grow. But whenever I step back and let them even struggle, they grow and then they get better. And that's part of also being, following the call that God has placed on your life, right? Is to think about that, and that it's okay for other people to struggle through some things as well, right? Because there was a time when you struggled through leading worship, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Right? There was a time when you struggled through teaching in your classroom, right? I've struggled through plenty of sermons in my life, but not anymore, right? Because other people gave me the grace to struggle,
Absolutely.
right? Well, okay, so let's move on and kind of get to the heart of this first part of our Cain and Abel story, and we're circling back to this idea of why is Cain not accepted, and we're talking about, well, we think we know why his face is downcast because he's comparing himself to Abel, right? The story never says why Cain is not accepted. Now, like you said, there are some allusions to he did not do what was right. So there's something there that's not right.
Right.
We don't get a specific reason, do we? Like you mentioned, I've been reading this type of literature long enough to know when a detail is left out of the text, it might be just as important as the details that are provided. Let's speculate on that for a moment.
Wow.
Why does the story not tell us? And I think it's along the lines of this comparison idea. Why does the story not tell us why Cain's sacrifice is not accepted?
This is one of those situations where I don't want to answer because I don't want to answer the wrong answer. And then I'll be downcast.
And then
Because you'll be comparing
I'll be
yourself.
comparing. At least I know what Ron did this morning.
God, we're not going to invite that guy back. He has no idea what he's
How
talking
come Ron
about.
wasn't on any of the other episodes of the podcast?
Go watch the first one and you'll know.
Ron again.
I missed that first episode, but
Oh, it's funny.
No. Sorry.
So in verse 2, the end of verse 2, it says, so it's quickly she gave birth, and then when they grew up,
yeah,
they became this and they became this. So we don't know anything about their growing up.
right.
They're grown.
Yeah.
So we don't know anything about their childhood or their
Right.
relationship, even with God through that point,
That's
because
right.
it's not like God was absent until it's time for this sacrifice.
They both
Yeah.
knew to bring a sacrifice.
yeah.
Yeah.
And both did it.
There's
They both
prior-
brought a sacrifice.
That's That's right.
And I don't imagine that this is the first time he's been downcast about this. It's not like, oh man, now I'm mad. I'm gonna go kill somebody.
Yeah.
Like this is something that's been building probably.
Maybe so.
Right.
I mean, I'm just telling you, if I had two sons and one of them brought me meat and the other one brought me grain, I may like the one who brought me meat more. I'm just saying. I don't
Spoken
know.
like a hunter, really.
Sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
That's funny.
Sometimes the text leaves details out because I think that these scriptures are also designed to work as a type of a mirror. You guys ever go to a carnival and you go into the House of Mirrors? You ever been there before? Or you at least know what we're, and some of those mirrors are, Ryan's looking at me like I have no idea
Have you
what you're
seen
talking
videos
about.
of people doing this?
Well, like you've got some of those mirrors that are just straight
Yeah.
and you see yourself clearly. Then there are other mirrors where parts are distorted and other parts are enlarged. And so one mirror you've got a really big head and a little body, and other mirrors you got a really round tummy and a really little head, and they're designed to show you different pieces of yourself and enlarge certain parts or magnify other areas. I think that a lot of these early stories in the Bible are those. It's like a house of mirrors. With some stories are designed to show you yourself clearly, and other stories are designed to highlight certain places of your life. But all of them, you're supposed to see yourself in the story. I think there's something to be said here with with God's question to Cain. And the question, the second part of the question, if you do what is right, will you not be accepted? And the question is, whose responsibility is it for Cain to do what is right?
It's Cain.
It's his own, yeah.
Cain's.
I think the part of the story, the mirror that we're supposed to ask is, so then whose responsibility is it to bring your sacrifice?
Yeah.
I think the authors know, and inspired by the Holy Spirit, that if they told us why Cain's sacrifice was not accepted, how many books would be written on the comparison between Cain and Abel's sacrifice? It would be...
Just be that one little detail.
Oh my goodness. And how long would we sit here and speculate on the difference between Cain's and Abel's sacrifice if the text told us exactly what was wrong?
Yeah.
And then we would be comparing the brothers, which is what Cain is in trouble for doing. Right? And so the text itself is ambiguous so that it will stop us from doing the thing that got Cain. Because the point of the text is only Cain knows why Cain's sacrifice is unaccepted, right? Only Cain knows why God doesn't want his sacrifice. And we don't know, but I think that we flip that onto ourselves and say only Ryan knows.
Right.
Between Ryan and God, if Ryan's giving Ryan's best sacrifice.
Wow.
Only Tanner knows
Yeah.
if Tanner's bringing Tanner's best sacrifice. And again, it removes the ability for us to compare. So I think the text is unclear on purpose.
That's good.
Because it wants for you to see yourself in the story and ask that question. And so I'll just kind of close this first part with that question, and with that thought is, are you bringing the right sacrifice? Are you bringing the right sacrifice?
That's good.
That's good.
Yeah. Because while there's freedom here, there's also accountability. There's individual responsibility. And as our study continues, we'll talk about the ramifications of that responsibility. But I think that's the first bit of wisdom that we pull from the text is, I'm the only one who knows what my sacrifice is, but I'm also the only one who can bring it. And I got to bring it, and God expects me to bring it.
Thanks for listening to FBC Seminole's The Table podcast. A new episode will be released each Monday. We invite you to pull up a chair and join our table each week as we dig into God's Word together. We would love for you to join one of our Connect groups that meets throughout the week and worship with us on Sunday mornings at 9 or 10:30. If you'd like more information, you can call our church office at 432-758-3291 or visit our website at fbcseminole.org.